My name is Serena Calloway, 31 years old. The night everything cracked open started like any other Sunday dinner at my parents' house in suburban Illinois. The smell of pot roast drifted through the kitchen. My mother's porcelain figurines gleamed from their glass case, and the muted hum of the evening news played from the living room. It should have been familiar, comforting even, but that night, tension coiled in my stomach like barbed wire. My parents were laughing, their voices bright and unbothered, as though they were about to share good news. My sister Elaine sat across the table, head tilted down, pretending to be shy, though I caught the flicker of a smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. Then my father cleared his throat, a signal I'd grown to dread since childhood. It always meant a pronouncement was coming. "Elaine will just stay at your place for a while," he said casually, as if he were mentioning the weather. My mother nodded, beaming. "Yes, just until she finds something more permanent. Such a lovely arrangement." The words barely registered before my body reacted. My fork clattered against the plate. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. "Funny," I said, my voice steady, though my pulse thundered in my ears. "I haven't lived there for 6 weeks." Silence fell like a dropped curtain. My mother's smile froze, her hand trembling slightly as she adjusted her napkin. "Wait, then," she stammered. "Where exactly have you been staying?" For once, Elaine's smug confidence faltered. She glanced at me sharply, as if trying to measure how much I knew, how much I would reveal. My father's jaw tightened, his face flushed red, not from shame, but from the loss of control. And in that moment, I realized they thought they could still script my life the way they always had. But this time, they didn't know the ending. I hadn't planned to reveal my secret so soon. My move, my carefully built escape, was supposed to be private. But their arrogance, the audacity to hand over the keys to my sanctuary as if it belonged to them, unleashed something in me. To explain why that moment broke me, you'd have to understand the pattern. My entire life, Elaine had been the star while I was the backdrop. Growing up in Naperville, our house had 4 bedrooms, but somehow the spotlight only seemed to shine on one child. From the very beginning, the lines were drawn. Elaine was fragile, gifted, in need of attention. I was the strong one, the independent daughter who supposedly didn't require anything. That label followed me like a shadow. It excused every oversight, every forgotten celebration, every unequal choice. I still remember my 16th birthday. I had been hinting for months about a small gathering at Tony's Pizzeria, my favorite local spot. The day came, and nothing. My mother was too busy driving Elaine, then 11, to a dance recital. My father was working late. I ended up ordering a small pizza by myself, sitting cross-legged on my bed, leafing through college brochures while pretending it didn't hurt. 5 years later, when Elaine turned 16, my parents rented out an entire venue, hired a DJ, and topped it off by gifting her a car with a shiny red bow. I clapped along, smiled for the photos, and swallowed the ache like I always did. School events were the same. They skipped my honor society inductions, missed most of my debate finals. At my high school graduation, when I gave the speech as salutatorian, my mother spent more time taking pictures of Elaine in the stands than watching me speak. But when it came to Elaine, vacations were rearranged to fit her softball tournaments. Tutors were hired when she struggled. They stayed up late helping her with science projects while I worked quietly in my room, teaching myself. And yet I never complained, at least not out loud. College widened the rift even further. I worked 3 jobs. Mornings at a coffee shop, evenings in the library, weekends waiting tables to cover my tuition at Northwestern. My parents contributed what they called what we can afford. It amounted to $500 a semester, not enough for books, let alone rent. I lived on caffeine, scraps of sleep, and sheer determination. Elaine, meanwhile, attended the University of Chicago with full parental support. Not only did they cover tuition, but they paid her rent, her car, even her wellness retreats when school got too stressful. She graduated debt-free while I carried scars of exhaustion no one noticed. That was the rhythm of our family. Elaine stumbled, and a dozen hands reached to steady her. I stumbled, and everyone cheered at how quickly I caught myself. But independence has a breaking point. After college, I landed an entry-level job at a digital marketing firm in Chicago. My salary barely covered rent for a shoebox apartment shared with 3 roommates, but I budgeted ruthlessly. I skipped vacations, packed lunches, took side gigs managing social media for small businesses, Every dollar went toward one dream, my own place. And after 3 grueling years, I did it. I signed the papers for a 1-bedroom in River North, 900 square feet of exposed brick, hardwood floors, and windows that captured the morning light just so. It wasn't much compared to the suburban houses my parents romanticized, but to me, it was everything. I furnished it piece by piece. A gray sectional couch earned from 6 months of overtime, a mismatched bedroom set scavenged from thrift stores and refinished by hand, an antique reading chair from my grandmother that I restored myself. Nothing matched, but each piece carried meaning. It was proof that I could build beauty from scraps. That apartment became more than walls and furniture. It became my sanctuary, my proof of survival. Every night, I sat by the window with tea, watching the city lights flicker, telling myself I had carved out something that belonged only to me. And maybe that's why my parents' announcement at dinner sliced so deep. To them, it wasn't a sanctuary at all. It was simply a resource for Elaine. Another thing I had built, stripped away to fix her chaos. Back at the dinner table, I met their stunned faces and felt something shift inside me. My mother's trembling voice asked again, "Then where have you been staying?" I didn't answer, not yet. Instead, I let the silence stretch, let them squirm in the space they had created, blind to the years that had led here. Because this wasn't just about an apartment. It was about a lifetime of being unseen. And for the first time, I wasn't going to swallow the hurt. I was going to make them see it. And so the truth began to unravel. I wish I could tell you that what happened at that dinner table was an isolated moment, but the truth is, it was just the latest chapter in a story that had been unfolding since the day I was born. In our house, there were 2 roles, the star and the supporting act. Elaine was the star. I was everything else. My parents never said it out loud, of course. They told neighbors and extended family how proud they were of both our girls, but their actions told a different story. When Elaine wanted something, the world bent to make it happen. When I wanted something, I learned to make do. The contrast began small, like shadows stretching longer as the day fades. One spring, my school hosted an art showcase. I'd spent weeks sketching and shading a charcoal piece of Lake Michigan at dusk, carefully layering shadows across the waves. My art teacher praised it, said it had soul. I was so excited for my parents to see it. That evening, they arrived late, flustered, apologizing because Elaine's piano lesson had run long. They gave my drawing a distracted glance, muttered, "Nice work," then hurried off to compliment another parent they knew. 2 years later, Elaine won 2nd place in her middle school poetry contest. My parents bought balloons, baked a cake, and threw her a celebration dinner. The poem was about her cat. I tried to be happy for her, but the unfairness lodged in my throat like a stone. By high school, the divide was a chasm. When Elaine turned 16, they handed her car keys wrapped in ribbon. I'd been driving my father's dented old sedan to school, saving scraps of paycheck from babysitting to one day buy my own. That night, after her party, my mother hugged me and said, "You've always been so mature, Serena. You don't need all this fuss." It was meant as praise, but what I heard was, "Your needs don't matter." Academics didn't change anything either. I was on the debate team and I lived for those tournaments. The thrill of constructing an argument, of standing my ground under pressure, it gave me purpose. I made it to the finals one year, my team counting on me. My parents promised they'd come. But the day of the competition, I scanned the crowd and saw only empty seats. Later, I found out they'd gone to watch Elaine's softball scrimmage instead. Not a championship, not a big game, just practice. When I graduated as salutatorian, I delivered a speech about perseverance. My voice shook as I spoke about climbing uphill battles and the importance of grit. From the stage, I spotted my mother in the crowd. She wasn't even looking at me. She was taking pictures of Elaine in her sundress, laughing with cousins. I remember the sting behind my eyes, the way my throat tightened, but I smiled anyway, always smiling, always swallowing. The financial differences were the sharpest cut of all. At Northwestern, I worked mornings at the cafe, shelving library books at night, waitressing weekends. I was exhausted but determined. My parents gave me $500 a semester, barely enough for books. When I asked once if they could help a little more, my father said, "Serena, you're so resourceful. You'll figure it out." And I did. I always did. Elaine, meanwhile, studied at the University of Chicago, fully funded. Tuition, rent, groceries, everything covered. When she struggled with organic chemistry, Dad hired a private tutor. When she wanted to move off campus, Mom signed the lease herself. She graduated debt-free, smiling in her cap and gown, while my bank account barely crawled above zero. At the celebration dinner, my parents toasted her brilliance. No one mentioned the 3 jobs I was working. But maybe the worst part wasn't their favoritism, it was their blindness to it. Whenever I tried to express hurt, the words bounced back like rubber. Mom, you missed my induction tonight. Oh, sweetheart, Elaine had a fever, you understand, don't you? Dad, why can't you come to my match? Serena, you're so strong. You don't need us hovering. Each time, they dressed their absence in flattery. Independent. Mature. Capable. Those words became a cage. Because who could argue with compliments? Except they weren't really compliments at all. They were excuses. Looking back now, I can see how it shaped me. I learned to celebrate my own wins quietly. I bought myself flowers after exams. I baked my own cupcakes on birthdays. I stopped expecting applause, stopped waiting for their eyes to turn toward me. But the human heart isn't made to live unseen. No matter how much armor you build, the cracks eventually show. It's almost funny, in a tragic way, how blind I was to the seeds being planted. Every time Elaine got rescued, every time I got ignored, it built a story in our family. Serena will be fine, no matter what. And I was fine, until the day I wasn't. Until the day the life I'd worked so hard to build became something they tried to hand over to her like another gift. The night at the dinner table, when they announced she would stay at my place, wasn't a surprise betrayal. It was simply the climax of years of small betrayals, stitched together until the fabric of me finally tore. I sometimes wonder if my parents believed their own narrative. Maybe, in their minds, they weren't playing favorites. Maybe they thought giving Elaine more was balancing out her fragility. Maybe they thought withholding from me was a way of honoring my strength. But here's the truth. Strength doesn't mean you don't need love. Independence doesn't mean you don't deserve care. And no amount of resilience can erase the sting of being treated as optional in your own family. By the time I reached my 20s, I had a steady mantra playing in my head. If I don't take care of myself, no one will. So I worked harder. I pushed further. I learned to keep my pain private, because what was the point of voicing it? No one would hear me anyway. But one day, all of that silence would break open. And it began with a small, precious dream, an apartment of my own. By the time I turned 28, I had clawed my way to a place most people would call modest, but to me, it was holy ground. I had worked 3 jobs through college, built a shaky foundation at my first marketing job, and scraped together every dollar by skipping vacations, brewing cheap coffee at home, and saying no when friends invited me out for drinks I couldn't afford. Every decision I made, every night I stayed up late working a side project, every dollar I put into savings was for one goal: a place that was mine. When I finally signed the papers for my 1-bedroom in River North, I sat alone on the bare hardwood floor, keys dangling from my hand, and cried. Not the quiet tears I'd learned to hide as a child, but deep, unfiltered sobs of release. I had done this. I had built something without anyone's help. The apartment itself was nothing extraordinary to the outside world. Just 900 square feet with exposed brick, wooden beams, and wide windows that caught the morning sun. But to me, it was a cathedral. Every piece of furniture told a story. The gray sectional couch cost 6 months of overtime, chosen after weeks of agonizing over fabric swatches. The mismatched bedroom set came from 4 different thrift shops, sanded and refinished with aching arms and raw fingertips. The secondhand kitchen island, chipped on one corner, doubled as a dining table and workspace. And then there was my grandmother's antique reading chair. It was battered when I inherited it, the fabric threadbare and the wood scuffed, but I spent weekends restoring it. When I finally lowered myself into its seat by the window, a book in my lap, sunlight spilling over my shoulders, I felt something close to peace. That chair became my anchor, a reminder that broken things could be mended and still be beautiful. For the first time in my life, I felt safe. I cooked simple meals in my tiny kitchen, listening to the hum of the city outside. I hosted small dinners with friends, laughter echoing against the brick walls. I bought myself fresh flowers each week, their color brightening the space like little flags of victory. The apartment wasn't just where I lived, it was proof. Proof that I could build beauty out of scarcity. Proof that I could create stability without my family's handouts. Proof that I wasn't invisible, at least not to myself. I had finally built a sanctuary. Meanwhile, Elaine's life was a carousel of chaos. She bounced between jobs like a coin rattling across a table. 3 months at a coffee shop before the early hours crushed her creative energy. 6 weeks in an office job before she decided her boss didn't understand her process. 4 months trying to sell real estate before she gave up, declaring clients too demanding. Each time she called my parents in tears, and each time they swooped in to rescue her. They paid her rent, covered her car payments, even funded a 3-month wellness retreat in Arizona when she claimed job hunting triggered her anxiety. While I was budgeting down to the penny, she was floating on the endless safety net they wove for her. I told myself I didn't care, that I was stronger, better for it. But sometimes, late at night, I'd feel the bitterness creep in. Not because I wanted handouts, but because I wanted fairness. I wanted, just once, for them to notice the sacrifices I'd made. It wasn't long before Elaine's eyes turned toward my apartment. At first, it was subtle. She visited one evening for dinner, drifting through the rooms like a tourist, running her fingers along the brick, opening closets without asking. "This place is so perfect for entertaining," she mused, leaning against the counter as I stirred pasta sauce. "And you've got so much space for just one person." Her tone was light, but her eyes lingered in a way that made my skin prickle. Later, she asked casual questions. How much were my monthly fees? How strict was security? I laughed it off, chalked it up to curiosity. But something about her questions lodged in my chest like a warning bell I ignored. A month later, she called asking to borrow my black cocktail dress for an interview. When I got home, the dress was gone, along with 2 pairs of shoes, a designer handbag I'd bought for my 30th birthday, and jewelry I'd saved months to afford. When I confronted her, she rolled her eyes. "God, Serena, don't be so dramatic. I thought you'd want to help me look professional. It's not like you were wearing them today." Her words stung, not because of the things she took, but because of the entitlement behind them. Soon, the visits became unannounced. I'd come home from work to find her sprawled on my couch, sipping wine she'd poured from my cabinet, claiming the doorman had let her in. "Oh, relax," she'd say. "I was in the neighborhood, just needed some sister time." But it never ended there. She always asked for something, money for a car emergency, my laptop because hers was glitchy, even my credit card once because she forgot her wallet. And each time when I tried to push back, she tilted her head, her eyes filling with wounded innocence. "Why are you being so uptight? We're sisters. What's yours is mine, right?" It was a script she knew by heart, one that always worked on our parents. But I wasn't our parents. The final straw, before everything spiraled into chaos, came one quiet Sunday evening. I returned from a weekend trip to find my apartment in disarray. Empty wine bottles cluttered the counter, my couch cushions were stained, unfamiliar coats hung over my dining chairs. When I checked my bedroom, my heart dropped. My journal, where I had poured my private thoughts, therapy reflections, insecurities, lay open on the bed. A wine glass sat beside it, the lipstick smudge unmistakably Elaine's shade. The violation stole my breath. This wasn't just borrowing or barging in. This was trespass, an invasion of the one place I thought was untouchable. I called her immediately, my hands shaking. "Elaine," I demanded, "you were in my apartment, with people. You read my journal." She laughed, casual as always. "God, calm down. My roommates were unbearable. I just needed somewhere quiet to crash. It was only a few nights." "A few nights?" My voice broke. "Who else was here? What did you read?" "Just a couple of friends. Stop being so paranoid. And your journal was lying around. It's not like it's a state secret." Her flippant tone, her utter lack of remorse, carved a hollow inside me. And that's when the cracks in my sanctuary began to spread. Because it wasn't safe anymore. Not from her. Not from the family who would defend her, no matter what line she crossed. Not long before Elaine's uninvited visits began, I went through a breakup that left me shaken in ways I didn't fully admit to anyone. His name was Thomas. We met at a marketing conference, 2 young professionals trading jokes over bad hotel coffee and fluorescent lighting. He was ambitious, creative, quick with words in a way that drew people in. For the first time in my adult life, I thought I had found someone who truly saw me. Not just the capable daughter or the reliable employee, but Serena, the woman who carried unspoken weight. For 2 years, we built a life together. He stayed over often, filling the corners of my apartment with his notebooks, his camera gear, his half-drunk cups of coffee. He knew how much that apartment meant to me, how it was the one place untouched by my family's endless imbalance. But Thomas had a streak I ignored too long. He made decisions as if I were a supporting role in his story. It all came to a head one evening over takeout sushi. He set down his chopsticks, eyes bright. "I accepted the job," he said. "What job?" I asked. "In Seattle. They offered me senior creative. Great salary, huge opportunity." I blinked, waiting for the part where he said, "What do you think? Do you want to move with me? How can we make this work?" But it never came. He looked confused when I finally spoke. "Thomas, that's across the country. When were you planning to tell me?" "I'm telling you now." His tone was earnest, almost boyish. "I figured you'd be happy for me." Happy for him, as if my voice, my needs, my place in the decision didn't matter. That night, our relationship ended with the same quiet inevitability that had followed me since childhood. I was left behind, expected to clap and smile while someone else's path was chosen over mine. The weeks after the breakup were a blur of long walks, late-night tears, and hours sitting in my grandmother's chair by the window, staring out at the city lights. My apartment was supposed to be my fortress, but now it felt like a hollow echo chamber of everything I had lost. And into that vulnerability, Elaine slipped like smoke under a door. She started showing up more frequently, her excuses flimsy. "Thought I'd surprise you with company. I was bored, and your place is nicer. My Wi-Fi sucks. Can I just work here for a bit?" At first, I let it slide. My heart was raw from Thomas's departure, and some part of me thought maybe it was nice to have someone around, even if it was Elaine. But her presence was never gentle. She rifled through my closet, tried on my clothes without asking. She borrowed makeup and left the compacts smeared, the lipsticks twisted down to nubs. She opened my mail, claiming she thought it was hers. When I confronted her, she tilted her head, her voice dripping innocence. "Why are you being so uptight, Serena? We're sisters. Sharing is what sisters do." But it wasn't sharing. Sharing required consent. This was taking, always taking. The worst came one Friday when I returned from a business trip to find 8 strangers in my living room. Elaine had hosted a dinner party, using my dishes, spilling wine across my rug. My couch reeked of perfume and cigarettes, and one of the guests had left their coat draped across my reading chair, as if it belonged to them. I stood frozen in the doorway, the sound of laughter crashing over me like a wave. Elaine turned, wineglass in hand, cheeks flushed. "Oh, hey, you're back early. We cleaned up mostly." Mostly. My sanctuary, the space I had built with sweat and sacrifice, had been reduced to a playground for her carelessness. I pulled her aside into the kitchen, my voice shaking. "This is my home. You don't get to bring people here. You don't even get to be here without asking." She rolled her eyes. "God, you're so dramatic. It was just a few friends. Don't you like having a lively home?" "No, Elaine, I like having my home." But she didn't hear me. She never did. The next morning, I tried again. We sat across from each other at a cafe, the smell of burnt espresso lingering in the air. I laid it out clearly. "You cannot come over without calling. You cannot borrow my things without asking. And you will never, ever host another party in my apartment." Her response was immediate, sharp. "Why are you acting like this? We're sisters. What's yours is mine. Mom and Dad always said so." My hands clenched around my coffee cup. "No, Elaine. What's mine is mine." She left in a storm of indignation. Within hours, I got the call from my father. His voice was stern, laced with disappointment. "Serena, your sister feels hurt. Family supports each other. Don't be selfish." That word again. Selfish. The knife they always used when I refused to bleed for Elaine. Later, my mother called too, her voice tremulous. "Sweetheart, she just admires your beautiful home. Can't you be a little more generous?" I stared at the phone, fury and sorrow mingling in my chest. They never asked what Elaine had done. They never asked how I felt. The assumption was simple. Elaine needed, and I should provide. It was Jessica, my closest friend since college, who finally said aloud what I had been too afraid to admit. One evening, after Elaine had barged in, rummaged through my things, and left with a sweater she claimed looked better on her, Jessica turned to me. "That's not normal, Serena." I tried to laugh it off, "And she's just Elaine." "No," Jessica said firmly. "She goes through your mail. She comments on how much everything must cost. She takes your things without asking. That's not sisterly. That's invasive." Her words landed heavy, because deep down I knew she was right. But admitting it meant admitting the unthinkable, that my own sister wasn't just inconsiderate. She was dangerous to the one fragile piece of peace I had built. And if my parents kept siding with her, then maybe they were dangerous too. By then, I had started to notice strange little changes in my apartment. My passport wasn't where I'd left it. Financial documents had been shuffled. A pair of expensive earbuds went missing. At first, I doubted myself. Was I imagining things? Was I so on edge from the breakup that I misplaced them? But when I found my journal, my private therapy journal, lying open on my bed, the pages creased, my handwriting exposed like an open wound, I knew. She had crossed the line. There are violations you can recover from, and there are ones that break something fundamental inside you. Elaine. Reading my journal, taking my words meant only for me and my therapist, was the second kind. It was the crack in the wall of my sanctuary, and once a crack begins, it never stops spreading. I always thought the worst kind of loneliness was being unseen. But I was wrong. The worst kind is being seen by the wrong person. After Thomas left, I thought my apartment was my shield, but Elaine treated it like her playground, her trophy. The more I resisted, the more determined she seemed to prove that nothing in my life was truly mine. The signs piled up slowly, like whispers before a storm. At first, it was little things. A sweater gone, a pair of earrings missing. Then bigger things. My laptop mysteriously logged into her accounts, credit card charges I didn't recognize but couldn't prove. One night, I came home to find my closet door ajar. The smell of her perfume clung to the air. On the dresser, my jewelry box sat crooked, as if someone had rifled through it in a hurry. My chest tightened. I hadn't invited her in. Jessica was with me that night. She froze in the doorway, scanning the room. "Serena," she whispered, "this isn't right. She's been here." I wanted to deny it, but the truth was all around me. Jessica's eyes softened with concern. "You need to draw a line, a hard one, before she takes more than just things." Her words hung in the air. More than just things. I didn't know then how right she was. The final straw came after a business trip. I'd spent 3 days in New York presenting to a major client. It had gone well, better than well. My boss hinted at a promotion. For the first time in months, I felt like I was standing on solid ground again. That feeling shattered the moment I unlocked my apartment door. The smell hit me first. Wine and cigarettes. Then the sight. Bottles lined up on the counter, takeout containers stacked on the stove, my couch cushions on the floor. And voices, laughter. I froze in the hallway. My sanctuary was full of strangers. I stormed inside, my suitcase still in hand. 4 people I didn't recognize sat at my dining table, plates of half-eaten food before them. Elaine emerged from the kitchen, holding a wine glass, like the queen of the castle. "Oh, hey," she said, grinning as if this were her apartment. "You're back early." The anger that rose in me was almost blinding. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice shaking. She laughed. "Relax. It's just a little get-together. My roommates were driving me crazy. This was easier." "Easier?" My voice cracked into a shout. "This is my home. You don't get to host parties here. You don't get to bring strangers into my bedroom, use my dishes, touch my things." "Oh my God, Serena," she interrupted, rolling her eyes. "You're being insane. We cleaned up. Well, mostly. And it's not like you were even here." The strangers sat frozen, forks halfway to their mouths. One man muttered something and slipped out the door. I turned to them all. "Get out. Right now. All of you." Elaine set her glass down hard. "You're unbelievable. I was just trying to have a good time. I thought you'd want me to feel safe." Safe. The word stung because it was mine. This apartment was supposed to make me safe. Later that night, when the last of them left and the silence pressed in heavy, I found the worst violation yet. In my bedroom, my journal lay open on the bed. The pages were bent, dog-eared, where someone had lingered. Next to it, a wine glass stained with lipstick, the exact shade Elaine always wore. My heart dropped. My deepest thoughts, my therapy reflections, my rawest insecurities, all of it, devoured like gossip at a dinner table. I picked it up, my hands trembling. The pages smelled faintly of wine. My handwriting, my pain, exposed. My sanctuary wasn't mine anymore. I called her immediately. "Elaine, what the hell were you thinking?" My voice shook with fury I barely recognized in myself. "You read my journal. You brought people into my home. You trashed the one place I have—" "Oh my God, calm down," she said, laughing. "Your roommates suck. I just needed somewhere quiet. It was a couple nights." "Couple nights?" My voice broke. "You've been living here?" "Not living, just crashing. Don't be so dramatic. It's not like I stole anything." My throat closed with rage. "You stole my privacy. Do you even understand that?" Silence. Then her voice shifted into the wounded tone she wielded like a weapon. "I was in a bad place. My roommates are toxic. I thought my big sister would want to help me." There it was. The guilt, the manipulation, the role I was always forced to play. And even as my hands shook, a sickening truth settled in. No matter how many boundaries I set, she would break them. Because to her and to our parents, I was never more than a resource, a safety net. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the building felt like an intruder. Every shadow on the wall looked like a trespass. I kept hearing Jessica's voice before she takes more than just things. I didn't know it yet, but the invasion wasn't just about my apartment. It was about the life I had built, the identity I had carved for myself outside of my family's control. Elaine wasn't just breaking into my home, she was breaking into me. And the next move wouldn't come from her, it would come from my parents. The call came the next morning. My mother's voice was syrupy sweet, the kind she used whenever she was trying to disguise a command as an invitation. "Sweetheart, we're having dinner tomorrow night. It's important. Everyone will be there." Everyone. That meant Elaine. That meant Dad's lectures. That meant me being cornered. I wanted to say no. I wanted to hang up, but some deep, conditioned part of me couldn't refuse. So I said fine, and hung up before she could say more. The next evening, I drove to my parents' house with a knot in my chest. The house looked exactly the same as always, porcelain figurines in the front window, Dad's pipe tobacco lingering faintly in the air despite his doctor's warnings. From the outside, it was the picture of comfort. Inside, the air felt heavy. My father sat at the head of the table, posture straight, napkin folded with military precision. Elaine hovered by the window, scrolling through her phone, feigning indifference. My mother flitted around, adjusting serving dishes that didn't need adjusting. When we finally sat down, silence clung to us like humidity. I pushed food around my plate, waiting for the blow. It came, right on schedule, with the sound of my father clearing his throat. "Your sister has had some challenges recently," he began, as if Elaine weren't sitting right there. My mother jumped in immediately. "Her landlord has been completely unreasonable, raising the rent without warning." "There was warning," Elaine muttered, eyes still on her plate. I remained silent. I already knew where this was headed. Dad pressed on. "The point is, Elaine needs some temporary assistance. We've always taught you girls that family helps family." "Family helps family," Mom echoed, reaching across to squeeze Elaine's hand as if she were a fragile child. "And we know you have that lovely apartment with plenty of space." My fork froze in midair. "Elaine was evicted, wasn't she?" I said flatly. The silence confirmed it before anyone spoke. "It's not eviction if you leave voluntarily before it gets that far," Mom snapped, her lips tight. "We gave her money last month." "And the month before," Dad added, frowning at Elaine as though he was only just realizing the pattern. Elaine focused on her peas, stabbing them one by one. I set my fork down. "So what are you asking me?" Mom's smile was brittle. "We think it would be best if Elaine stayed with you, just until she finds a new place. A few months at most." "Absolutely not," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. Dad's head snapped toward me. "Serena, your sister needs help. This is what family does." "No," I said, heat rising in my chest. "This is what our family does for Elaine, not for me." The words came tumbling out, years of silence breaking open. When I needed help with tuition, I got another job. When I needed a place to live, I crammed into apartments with roommates. When I wanted to buy my own place, I saved for years. But when Elaine stumbles, you swoop in, every time. "That's different," Mom said quickly. "You've always been independent, capable." "That's just the excuse you use for giving me nothing while giving her everything," I snapped. My voice shook, but I didn't stop. Dad's face hardened. "You're being selfish." There it was, the word that had kept me compliant my whole life. "No," I whispered, my throat tight with tears. "I'm being honest." Mom waved her hand like she was swatting away a fly. "Oh, boundaries again. Sisters should share, Serena. That's what families do." "Support goes both ways," I shot back. "When has Elaine ever supported me? When has she respected my space, my belongings, my privacy? She read my journal, Mom. She invited strangers into my home, and you're asking me to reward that?" Elaine finally looked up, her voice trembling with practiced fragility. "I was just in a bad place. I needed help. Why are you so cruel?" The manipulation was textbook. Tears welling, voice breaking, an echo of every time she had been caught red-handed and still managed to win sympathy. I stood abruptly, my chair scraping the floor. "I'm not letting her move into my home. Not for a day, not for a week, not for months. You have 2 bedrooms here. She can stay with you." Mom's eyes widened. "That's not fair." "Fair?" My laugh was bitter. "You've never been fair to me." Dad's face reddened. "Sit down, Serena. Don't turn this into a scene." But I was already shaking, tears spilling hot down my cheeks. It's already a scene. It's been a scene my whole life, and I'm done playing the extra. I left my plate half full on the table and walked out, my parents' voices rising behind me, Mom pleading, Dad ordering, Elaine sniffling like the victim she always cast herself to be. I drove home gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Through the blur of tears, one thought crystallized with chilling clarity. Nothing will ever change. I will always be the responsible one, expected to sacrifice. I will always be the daughter whose needs come second. I will always be giving pieces of myself away until there is nothing left. Unless I change it myself. That night, back in my apartment, I finally broke. The sobs came from someplace primal, ripping out years of swallowed pain. I curled into a ball on the couch, clutching a pillow like a shield, as though it could hold me together. My chest hurt, my throat raw, but still the tears came. When they finally subsided, I felt hollow, empty. But within that emptiness, a strange clarity began to flicker. My sanctuary wasn't safe anymore. Elaine had contaminated it. My parents had trespassed in spirit, if not in body, by treating it as theirs to give away. It no longer felt like mine. If I wanted peace, if I wanted freedom, I would have to disappear. By 1 a.m, I was still wide awake, staring at the ceiling as shadows from passing cars slid across my walls. My face ached from crying, my throat raw. I couldn't stop replaying Dad's voice calling me selfish, Mom's dismissive wave, Elaine's trembling, "Why are you so cruel?" I had spent my whole life bending, breaking, reshaping myself to fit their script. But the night of that dinner, something inside me snapped clean. I reached for my phone. Taylor answered on the third ring, groggy. "Serena, what's wrong?" The story spilled out of me. Elaine's invasion, the journal, the ambush at dinner, the lifetime of being overlooked. By the end, my words were a jumble of sobs and fury. Taylor was silent for a long beat. Then, softly, "You know you don't have to keep playing the role they gave you, right?" "What do you mean?" My voice cracked. "They decided you're the dependable one, the safe one, the one who doesn't need. But you don't have to live inside that story. You can write a new one." Her words hit me like oxygen in a burning room. "What would you do?" I whispered. "If it were me, I'd ask, what would my life look like if I put my well-being above their expectations? Maybe that means cutting contact. Maybe it means moving somewhere they can't touch. Maybe therapy. Maybe all of it. All of it." By the time I hung up, the idea had taken root. I couldn't unthink it. The next morning, I called in sick to work, for the first time in 3 years. Instead of riding the train downtown, I sat at my laptop, scrolling through listings. By noon, I had scheduled 5 apartment viewings. By the end of the next day, I had signed a lease. It was a 4th-floor walk-up in Wicker Park, smaller than my River North condo, but it had character. Creaky wood floors, a tiny updated kitchen, windows that looked out onto a courtyard filled with trees. It wasn't polished, but it was alive. Most importantly, no one in my family knew it existed. "When can you move in?" the landlord, a kind woman named Harriet, asked as we signed papers at her kitchen table. "As soon as possible," I replied. "This weekend work?" "Yes," I said without hesitation. Just like that, the plan was in motion. Secrecy became my religion. I opened a new bank account across town, quietly transferring half my savings. I forwarded my mail to a P.O. box. I changed passwords, set up new emails, redirected deliveries to Amazon lockers. At work, I updated my contact info with a vague explanation about a family situation. I started bringing small boxes of my most precious belongings to the office, dropping them off at the new place on my way home. I decided to leave most of the furniture behind. The couch, the bed frame, the dining table, they all felt contaminated by Elaine's presence. Only what carried no shadow made the journey. My grandmother's restored reading chair, a handful of books, a few cherished kitchen items, my clothes. Setting up the new apartment was a kind of therapy. I bought new bedding, ocean blue and sea green, soft as clouds. I hung plants in the windows, sunlight pooling over their leaves. I framed photographs of friends, images of joy that had nothing to do with my family. In a sunlit alcove, I placed a secondhand desk. With my laptop perched there, the space felt both productive and peaceful. Each decision was a reclamation. Did it spark joy? Did it feel like mine? If not, I left it behind. By the end of the weekend, the place was sparse, but it was mine, truly mine. For the first time in years, I breathed without tension in my chest. But disappearing required more than moving furniture. It required disappearing from their narrative. I began answering texts with vague replies. Busy with work. Deadlines stacked. Feeling under the weather. When Mom asked about Sunday dinners, I pled exhaustion. When Dad wanted me to help move furniture, I claimed a deadline. When Elaine asked to crash just for tonight, I said my apartment was being painted. Excuses came easily. They always assumed I was just being difficult, not that I had vanished into another life. Weeks passed. My family's messages shifted from cheerful check-ins to worried demands. My mother left voicemails, her tone climbing from just making sure you're okay to I'm your mother and I demand you call me back. Dad's messages were blunt. This behavior is unacceptable. Family doesn't disappear. Elaine swung between venom and pleading. You've always been jealous of me. Then, hours later, I'm sorry, please, I need you. I answered none of them. Meanwhile, in Wicker Park, I began to rebuild myself. I cooked elaborate meals for one, just because I could. I invited Taylor over for Thai takeout, the two of us eating cross-legged on the floor. She looked around, eyes shining. You look different here, she said. Calmer, like you can finally breathe. She was right. I was sleeping better, smiling easier. Therapy helped too. My new therapist, Dr. Reeves, told me something I couldn't stop replaying. Families often assign roles. Caretaker, golden child, scapegoat. You've been the self-sufficient one. That role served the family system, but not you. By stepping out of it, you're disrupting decades of patterns. Expect resistance. Resistance came as promised. My parents' texts grew more frantic. Elaine's voicemails grew more unhinged. But none of it reached me, not in the way it used to. Because in that quiet apartment, surrounded by only what I had chosen, I felt something foreign and powerful, safety. And in that safety, I began to imagine a new version of myself, one that wasn't defined by sacrifice. Of course, I knew it couldn't last forever. The longer I ignored them, the more inevitable the confrontation became. And sure enough, one Tuesday morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Emergency family dinner tomorrow night. No excuses. 6 p.m. sharp. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. I could ignore it. I could stay hidden. But Dr. Reeves' words came back. Avoidance isn't the same as boundaries. If I wanted to break the pattern, I would have to face them. So I typed back 3 words. I'll be there. The weeks leading up to that dinner were a study in contrasts. In Wicker Park, I felt lighter. My mornings began with sunlight pouring across creaky wood floors, the smell of coffee filling the kitchen as I watered the plants hanging in the window. I walked to the farmer's market on Saturdays, chatted with neighbors, learned the rhythm of the courtyard below my window. For the first time in years, my body carried no constant weight in its chest. But on my phone, the old life clawed at me. My mother's messages escalated quickly. Serena, honey, just checking in. Call me when you can. Then, we're worried about you. Why aren't you answering? Then, this is not like you. What's going on? And finally, Serena Calloway, I am your mother, and I demand you return my calls immediately. The tone slid from sugar to steel, and I could hear her voice in every word. Dad's approach was blunter. His texts arrived at predictable times, usually during his evening commute. Your mother is worried sick. This behavior is unacceptable. Family doesn't just disappear. To him, my silence wasn't pain, it was rebellion. Something to be corrected. Elaine's messages were the wildest. One day, you've always been jealous of me. The next, I can't believe you'd abandon your own sister. Then, hours later, please, I just need a place to stay for a week. Just tonight. Please don't be cruel. Her words flickered between venom and pleading like a faulty light bulb. Dr. Reeves had warned me this would happen. Families resist when you disrupt the script, she said. They'll try anger, guilt, desperation, whatever has worked in the past. Your job is to notice it without giving in. So I practiced silence. I read their messages. I let the guilt and fear rise and pass. And then I put the phone down. It wasn't easy. Sometimes I stared at the screen, fingers itching to respond, to smooth things over the way I always had. But then I'd look around my new apartment, at the blue and green bedding that reminded me of the ocean, at the plants catching the afternoon light, and remember, this piece was fragile, and it was worth protecting. In the silence, I began to grow. I joined a book club at a local indie shop. I signed up for a pottery class, my hands shaping clay into uneven bowls that somehow felt beautiful. I went hiking on weekends with a group that carpooled to state parks, feeling my lungs expand with air untainted by family drama. I discovered that community didn't have to mean obligation, that friendship could be chosen, mutual, free of manipulation. Taylor came over often, dropping bags of Thai food on my counter, curling up with me on the floor to binge-watch old movies. One night, as we clinked glasses of cheap wine, she studied me closely. "You're glowing," she said. "It's like you finally recognize yourself." I smiled. I feel like I'm meeting myself for the first time. But as I built this fragile new life, I knew it was only a matter of time before the old one came knocking. The text about the emergency family dinner confirmed it. For days leading up to it, my phone buzzed with reminders. Mom sent 3 cheerful emojis, then, "We'll see you at 6. Dad texted, "Don't be late." Elaine sent nothing, which was almost worse. I prepared like I was going to battle. Dr. Reeves and I rehearsed likely scenarios. Taylor sat with me at coffee shops, playing devil's advocate, throwing out phrases she knew my parents would use. "Don't be selfish." "She's your sister." "Family is forever." Each time I practiced standing my ground. I'm not selfish for protecting myself. Elaine's choices aren't my responsibility. Family can't demand loyalty without respect. I picked out an outfit that made me feel untouchable. Dark jeans, a simple blouse, a tailored blazer. Something that said, "I am not a child at this table anymore." The day arrived. I drove toward my childhood home, the houses lined up in their perfect suburban order, lawns trimmed, porches glowing. To anyone else, it was a postcard of comfort. To me, it was a stage set for a play I no longer wanted to perform. I parked at the curb, hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned pale. The porch light flickered on, warm against the darkening evening. Through the curtains, I could see shadows moving in the dining room. My parents. Elaine. Waiting. I straightened my shoulders, inhaled deeply, and walked up the steps. For the first time in 31 years, I rang the doorbell instead of using my key. My mother opened the door, her smile stretched too wide. "Since when do you ring the bell?" she asked, her tone playful, but her eyes tight with nerves. "Since now," I said quietly, stepping past her into the foyer. The air inside was thick with the smell of pot roast. My father sat in his recliner, pretending to read a folded newspaper. Elaine perched on the couch, scrolling through her phone, her posture too casual to be real. "Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes, my mother announced, bustling back toward the kitchen. "I made your favorite." But I knew she hadn't. Elaine was the one who loved pot roast. I sat down at the farthest end of the couch, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it echoed in my ears. This wasn't dinner. This was a reckoning. And I was ready to fight for myself. Dinner began with silence disguised as small talk. My mother chattered nervously about neighbors and her garden club. My father grunted responses, eyes fixed on the muted baseball game flickering on the TV. Elaine picked at her food, her phone face down on the table, a little performance of attentiveness. I answered questions with clipped sentences, my appetite gone. I was waiting for the reason we were all here. It came with dessert. Mom brought out an apple pie, placing it on the table with exaggerated cheer. As she sliced it, Dad reached into his pocket and set something down between us. "A set of keys. My keys." "We've found a good solution," he said, as if this had been a logical discussion we'd all agreed to. "Elaine will stay at your place for a while, just until she's back on her feet." Mom nodded, her voice bright. "You're at work most of the time anyway. It makes perfect sense." "And Peterson, your building manager, says it's no problem to add her temporarily," Dad added. I stared at the keys, my hands frozen in my lap. My heartbeat slowed, strangely calm. "You spoke to my building manager," I said softly, "without talking to me?" "We knew you'd agree once you thought about it," Mom replied quickly. "Family helps family." Elaine finally looked up, a small, victorious smile curling at her lips. "I promise I'll keep everything super clean this time." That was it. The mask cracked. I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "That's funny. I haven't lived there in 6 weeks." The silence that followed was absolute. Mom's fork clattered against her plate. Dad's brows knit in confusion. Elaine's smirk fell, her lips parting as her face paled. "What do you mean you haven't lived there?" Mom whispered, her voice trembling. Dad leaned forward, anger creeping into his tone. "What are you talking about, Serena? Of course you live there. We just spoke to your manager." "I still own it," I cut in. "But I don't live there. Not anymore. I moved out after Elaine broke in while I was away. She brought strangers into my home. She read my private journal." Elaine's face flushed crimson. It wasn't like... It was exactly like that, I said, my voice cold. You've never respected me. Or my boundaries. Boundaries, Mom repeated, throwing up her hands. You and your boundaries. Families don't need boundaries. Healthy families do, I replied, and healthy families respect them. Dad's face hardened. So you've been lying to us for weeks, hiding where you live. What kind of daughter does that? The kind who has learned it's the only way to survive, I said quietly. The kind who finally realized she'll never be treated equally here. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We've always treated you girls the same. A bitter laugh escaped me. No, you haven't. When Elaine needed tuition, you paid it. When I needed it, I worked 3 jobs. When she lost apartments, you bailed her out. When I saved for years to buy mine, you barely acknowledged it, until you decided to hand it to her. That's completely different, Dad barked. Elaine needs more support. She's sensitive. And I was capable, I finished for him. So capable, you decided I didn't need parents at all. Elaine finally spoke, her voice breaking into a practiced sob. Where am I supposed to go now? I have nowhere. That's not my problem, I said, surprised at how steady the words came. It never was. But somehow, it always became mine. Not anymore. You can't just abandon your sister, Mom gasped. Where are you living? We need to know. No, I said firmly. Not until I can trust you not to use it against me. Elaine doesn't get to know. Neither do you. Dad's voice rose, angry thunder. We are your parents, not your enemies. Then start acting like it, I replied, standing. Start respecting my choices. Start treating me like an adult, not just the safety net for your golden child. You can't just walk away, Mom pleaded, panic edging into her voice. I've been trying to have this conversation my entire life, I said, grabbing my purse. You've never listened. When you're ready to treat me as more than a backup plan, you know how to reach me. Elaine's tears flowed freely now. You're being so mean. I just needed help. I turned to her, really looking at her, not as my sister, but as the woman who had spent years taking what wasn't hers. You've always needed help, Elaine, and I've always given it, even when it cost me. That ends tonight. Her sobs grew louder. My parents' voices followed me to the door, a mixture of anger and pleading. You're still family, Mom cried. Family is forever. I paused, my hand on the knob. I'm not walking away from family. I'm walking away from the role you assigned me. I'll always be your daughter, but I won't be Elaine's safety net anymore. Then I walked out. The drive back to Wicker Park felt surreal. My hands should have been shaking, my heart pounding. Instead, I felt a strange, profound calm. For the first time in my adult life, I had stood my ground. I had spoken my truth without apology. When I climbed the stairs to my apartment and opened the door, the space welcomed me with quiet peace. It wasn't fancy, it wasn't polished, but it was mine. Every corner, every creak in the floorboards, every plant soaking in the window light, it was mine. And in that quiet, I realized something powerful. I hadn't just moved apartments. I had moved into myself. The days that followed weren't easy. Relief came first, but then doubt, guilt, loneliness. I missed Sunday dinners, even though they'd always left me empty. I grieved the fantasy of a family that had never really existed. But slowly, the emptiness became possibility. I filled it with new rituals, Sunday walks, phone calls with friends, cooking for myself. When my parents reached out, I answered cautiously, setting limits. When Elaine texted, I ignored her manipulations. And when she finally admitted she had started therapy, I responded with just 5 words, I'm proud you're trying. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. Months later, I sat in my little apartment surrounded by laughter, friends from the book club, Taylor beside me, food on the table. For once, I didn't feel like an extra in someone else's story. I felt like the main character of mine. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is rewrite the script you were handed. And sometimes family isn't the people who share your blood. It's the people who see you, respect you, and stay when they don't have to. I had finally stopped being the forgotten daughter. I had finally chosen myself.